Nathan, so he'll be happy. Um, if you all look in the chat window, and you should have gotten an email from CPC this week. I created a web form for us, but it's in your chat window. You click on that, and you can add the date that you attended and some information about the call, and that way Smartsheet is compiling all of those responses for us, because as I mentioned last week, I want to make sure that we make these productive to everyone who joins in. I want to make sure that we're getting across to everyone what needs to be gotten across, and that everyone's kind of getting their say in. So feel free to fill that out. If you've joined multiple calls and you want to highlight information about each call, just do multiple times and just put the date of the call. So I'll make sure that I post that every week in the chat, so that it's there to remind everybody, and they can do it about the call that day if you want. As I mentioned, Nathan's on the way back from a BIM event in Europe. So he said he's got a big update for us on we'll do next week, next Friday. He's also probably got an update based on being on the Construction Trio podcast last week. I don't know if you've heard it. I haven't finished listening to it yet, but he was on there with those guys last week. So take a listen to that if you get a chance. As I mentioned, Lonnie's got a big update, but he got caught up in some meetings and won't be able to make it today. I don't have anything new to really present this week. Just going back and looking through the notes. Yeah, I don't remember anything coming up. I don't think Lagiza is going to be on the phone to give an update as well. So in just a minute, I'll pass it over to Ivan to take over. But to kind of set up, I think, why we wanted to have Ivan on the phone and why Nathan set that up. A couple weeks ago, we did a presentation by, I can't remember the guy's name now. Terry Ann, what was his name?
Anthony?
Yeah, Anthony. Yeah. And we were talking about printing PDFs, and we've had some discussions within the coalition and maybe putting something in the guidelines about printing PDFs. And what I call smart PDFs, where they actually have information associated with them, just like a 3D PDF has data attached to it. What I call a smart 2D PDF that has layers and other things. And right now, and he can correct me if I'm wrong or correct me so we can see how it is. That workflow right now, at least from Revit, is an export of a DWG file that may or may not have layer associations with it, whether you do it or don't do it when you export it. I know we've had conversations before. Some people don't want any layers. Some people do want specific layers. Some people don't care. That's where we talked about maybe creating a template for the Construction PDF Coalition where maybe there's 3 different ones. There's everything's on one layer, everything's on a certain set of layers, and then another one where everything's just on a few different layers. We haven't really looked into it yet. But basically, what happens then after you get that DWG, you have to open it in AutoCAD and then print it with the, PC3, I think, driver within AutoCAD to get those layers and some other intelligent information out of it. My issue with that is we have to open up AutoCAD. I opened up AutoCAD to do that about 6 weeks ago, and I hadn't opened up AutoCAD in 6 months. So I don't want to have to open up AutoCAD if I don't have to go through that process. So I've talked to Bluebeam. Bluebeam says it's an Autodesk thing about how they control it. So they really can't do anything about it at the moment. And I think some of the workflows that Andrew may have been talking about, I couldn't catch whether, and I know he was trying to print from some files that some architects sent him, but I'm not exactly sure why that wasn't coming out for him the way it was. But anyway, I know Ivan kind of commented and had some ideas and questions that day, so we wanted to get him back on. Before I do pass it on to, well, I'll do the roll call at the end just so we get it. Anybody that comes in late, did anybody have anything to add before I pass it on to Ivan? Everybody good? All right, I'm gonna. I'm going to stop sharing, and Ivan, just go down to the bottom and hit the green to share, and you should be good to go. And you're on mute.
Better?
There we go. Yep.
All right, so a discussion that I had on that meeting was to successfully create a workflow where the exported PDF from Revit keeps some of the intelligence that's required to be able to manage documents for construction purposes. Because, and actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience managing digital documents for Balfour Beatty Construction and what was the process that we handled at that point. And by the time I left Balfour Beatty, we were on the Revit 2015 first release. And by the second release, the R2 release for Revit 2015, there was an added feature where you could actually export PDFs with the embedded hyperlinks that connected callouts and also the index, rather than building that outside of Revit. So it shortens up the process and it leads to less mistakes than if you do that process manually. But let me start here so we can look through what I wanted to share with you today. All right. Bear with me 1 second. Share screen. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So let me get started. First, this is the agenda of the topics that I wanted to cover on this presentation. First is we're going to talk a little bit about electronic PDFs exported from Revit. Also, how to improve the performance of exporting PDFs out from Revit. And we'll look at some of the common problems that I saw with different design firms when they provided PDF files. Some of them are the misalignments of sheets, where you actually want not only the architects but also the engineers' drawings to be aligned, especially floor plans, so you'll be able to overlay them more easy on PDF reader writers such as Acrobat Reader or even Bluebeam. The other thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about is the issue of rasterized versus vector PDF, and I'll show you some of the features that Revit nowadays carries with regards to the production of rasters and vector PDFs. And last but not least, on the common problems is the scale issue. Multiple architectural firms and engineering, if they don't talk to each other at an early stage and they don't set up the ground rules, you're going to get drawing files that are not produced on the same scale. You might have a bigger scale from the architects and smaller scale from engineers, and when you want to do overlays, that becomes an issue. You can correct those problems with a PDF reader writer, but eventually when you want to do a batch process and you're not certain that all drawings contain the same scale, then it becomes an issue. And also I'd like to talk a little bit about the changing phase of document control in where the industry's heading. We now face a huge problem where we have a large redundancy of documents, and basically we're producing too many PDFs, too many Revit files, too many DWGs to be able to sustain a process, a document process in construction. I also created a flow chart that depicts the process that we used at Balfour Beatty to be able to produce and control digital documents. and I'd like to share a little bit about this process, so you'll be able to see some of the pain points that there is in construction with regards to handling documents. And at the end, if time permits, we'll do a very short demo on producing smart PDFs directly from Revit. Now, with regards to your question with layering, layers, Revit is, oh, somebody just joined. Well, Revit is not, it's not based on layers. It does not create layers. Okay? You're able to actually export to a DWG, and you can do a setup of the families and export them to specific layers when you're producing a DWG file. And converting that DWG file to layers allows you to do the layering on a PDF file. So the process that you just mentioned, it does work if you convert it to a DWG file. You don't have that same level of control of layers on Revit. Revit works in a different manner. All right, so what's the advantage of printing PDFs directly from computers rather than scanning? When you produce an electronic PDF file, as you all know, you are able to create a table of contents that provides easy navigation through hyperlinks. One of the things that we mimicked at Val3D was the creation of this hyperlinks on the index sheets to be able to create this easy navigation. We were trying to mimic the way that superintendents and engineers actually navigated through the documents, through the paper documents. So the adoption of electronic documents was a lot easier. And there was a very big acceptance of managing documents through PDFs. Actually, this was implemented on a $150 million project, which successfully actually ditched paper documents. Now, the other thing that it's imperative of having smart PDF documents is being able to hyperlink markers, sheets, and actually callouts from sheets. Now, to be able to achieve this, you have to install a proper PDF print driver. Either Acrobat Reader or Bluebeam. I've used both, and I've successfully managed to keep a lot of the hyperlinks using both features. But not only that, but you also need a PDF viewer that's capable of reading those hyperlinks, and not all of them are capable of doing it. To be able to improve performance, well, throughout the export of PDFs, you'll find that you want to use a vectorized vectorized printout of the PDF rather than a raster printout. Not only for quality purposes, because if you do a vectorized, you'll keep some of the information. The PDF becomes a searchable PDF. When you have shadowed or fully colored views in Revit, Revit automatically converts that into a rasterized PDF. Well, that portion into a rasterized PDF. You want to unload links that are not necessary for the file, and also use fart clipping when possible to minimize the information that's transferred or printed out to the PDF, rather than the PDF print driver doing the culling of the 3D model for you. You're actually doing it inside Revit. You want to also detach files that not pertain to the printing option. That way, the PDF print driver does not read through unnecessary files. This will enhance the exporting properties. It'll make it quicker. And also, when you're doing export, I found this. It diminishes a little bit of the production that you might have from the person that's actually exporting, but I would suggest also avoiding opening other applications, because it will substantially eat up resources from your computer and it will slow down the process. All right, so let's talk about the common problems. What you're looking at right now, it's a printout of a floor plan from a PDF from Revit. When you look at it, it seems to be the same production. And I saw this on several instances during construction projects where the architect modified the alignment for any reason from the views inside the page layout. And when you are doing batch comparison and trying to look at the differences between a revision set, it becomes a huge issue. So what we did at the beginning of production drawings is we coordinated with the design firms to be able to look at setting up the drawings properly. So if you take a closer look, you're going to see that the alignment on this grid, let's see, the alignment on grid is completely different from this alignment on grid. So when you do a comparison, you would have to use you would have to realign the two drawings to be able to do a comparison between the two drawings inside the PDF reader writer. If you're running on Bluebeam and doing and using the compare feature, sometimes it can automatically pick the alignment, but on a lot of the times I had to use the 3-point alignment with Bluebeam, which actually becomes an issue when you're doing a batch comparison, because you'll come up with a very huge array of results. And the solution's not that complicated. If you set up the ground rules and the architects and engineers coordinate a guide grid when they're producing their PDFs, then they can actually align the grid lines to a specific coordinate within that guide grid in Revit. The other thing that I saw happening, but this is not a too often error or mishap during the production of PDF files, was that the engineers usually modify the paper placements for them to be able to print paper print their PDF files. And this becomes an issue because this also misaligns the documents when you're trying to do a batch comparison. Now let's take a look at rasterized versus vectorized. And this, when you're doing a sheet comparison between a vectorized PDFs, the outcome or results from that comparison is extremely accurate, and it actually show you the exact changes from revisions. But when you compare, when you compare vectorized, you get accurate readings. When you compare rasterized PDFs, then you're comparing pixels. And when you're comparing pixels, you're not going to get a lot of the times you get a lot more than what you need when comparing them, because you need to set up a level of detail for that comparison, which will not only show the results of the changes, but will also show results that might not be meaningful for the analysis that you're trying to perform when comparing two sheets. If you take a closer look at the sheets, you're going to see that this on the right side is a rasterized PDF. And you'll see that there is missing information. And if you continue zooming in, you'll see that some of those pixels will appear. But when you do a comparison, this becomes an issue because the level of detail is less on a rasterized PDF. Now here on the top, you got the option when you're setting up your PDF print.
Ivan?
Yes.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Why does anybody do raster then? What's the reason?
The reason for?
Yeah, why is it even an option?
If you want to rasterize the process?
Yeah, like, I mean, if you're losing the quality, why would people want to do that? Does it enhance something else?
Usually I've seen this happening when they do renderings, when they have a lot of renderings on the PDF, rather than going through through Revit, doing the process to identify those renderings and rasterizing those portions. They rather rasterize the entire page.
Oh, so it's faster doing it with raster than vector.
It's faster because you don't leave the computer to try to identify the renderings inside the sheet, but you rasterize everything. Make sense?
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right. So another problem that I see happening with especially with subcontractors, when you're trying to also do comparison, is that they tend to change the scale based on documents provided. Either they do a smaller sheet you can actually fix this in the PDF reader writer by setting the scale of your drawings when doing comparison, but it loses its accuracy. Documents are not going to be set on the same grid, on the same coordinate on the page, which you will have to realign. And the other thing, if you're doing the same thing, a batch comparison, which is what you want to try to do in order to not waste time doing sheet by sheet, it diminishes the efficiency of the person doing this comparison. So same thing, a lot of people, well, this is a back and forth, and this is probably things that you don't want to see, that people start using this fit page. And reason for that, that's going to completely change the scale. You're going to have something that you're not going to be able to set an accurate scale on the page. All right, so let's just discuss very briefly the changing phase of document control. As you're aware, I don't know how many of you guys actually did paper documents back when everything was produced in paper and we didn't actually use PDF. You have the redundancy of documents, of printed documents. You have a huge number of sets, but eventually you had a little bit more control over what sets were printed. And at some point, those sets were distributed through each party involved in the construction process. There was certainly a lag with regards to it, but now that's extremely easy to create sets. You have a redundancy of documents. At the end of the day, a lot of the times, when you're completing the project, it's hard to identify which is the valid set, or if you have a document that was issued, emailed, and it's not the most current that you have on, let's say, your cloud server or on your local server where you're actually hosting the handover documents. So it becomes an issue, and I think you've experienced it. Sometimes you have the final Revit file, or the final PDF file, or the version 1, version 2, version 3, and you're trying to keep track based on a change in the name of the file that you're tracking. So that is a big issue. And the other issue that's happening right now, it's that everything's going mobile. So you want to have everybody use the latest and greatest file available, right? So you want, in a certain way, to have a centralized repository of files and everybody pulling out of that same repository of files. So I'll talk to you through what we did with Balfour Beatty. And it was an effective method. It was a lot of work, but it was extremely effective. We had a lot of success with the methodology. But it's not, first of all, it's not a scalable method. And I think it's at a point that I believe it's going to change dramatically, because you don't want to have an engineer spending weeks or, well, in this case, now that there are tools that actually automate some of the hyperlinking process, you don't want to have somebody sitting and doing that hyperlinking, you're wasting not only the time of that person because he's not learning anything new, but you're also wasting the company's money because you're having a person do something that does not pertain construction. And all those documents, the hyperlink of those documents, you have to make them available to everybody. Now, the last but not least is compliance and standards. It's extremely important now that information in construction is becoming a discussion topic. If we go back into when we delivered paper to the owners, you were delivering boxes of papers, binders, and all those boxes and papers that were eventually put in the storage room, and they were forgotten. And you had the operation maintenance teams rebuild from scratch because the documents that were handed over to owners actually didn't work as facility management requires document to work. Now that we're on a digital area, we're actually producing digital documents. Now, a lot of people are more concerned on producing smart PDFs, readable PDFs, searchable PDFs. But we're falling into the same thing that we're producing a handover documents to the owner, where we're actually producing a thumb drive with information that's not related or connected in a way that becomes a lot more meaningful for operation maintenance, which is the biggest cost on a project for an owner. It represents 75 to 80% of the cost of the life cycle of a project. So we're producing a thumb drive that eventually, instead of putting it in a storage room, they put it in a drawer. And you have the same facility management team recreating the information and setting it up in a way that it becomes a little bit more useful for them. Now we're turning the page to a new era where information is something that's being scrutinized by everybody, and it's becoming a lot more relevant and important. And this information needs to be smarter. As you mentioned, some people like to work with layers, like to turn on and off layers. But I think more important than that is how information is interconnected between each other. So if you're searching for a specific topic with regards to what happened on a project on a specific date and what cost was associated to that, or even if you're looking for maintenance for a specific item, that should be extremely easy to find by the people that are eventually going to operate the facility. Sorry. So technologies that are used today to be able to control documents, we're moving into a cloud-based collaboration effort where everybody is looking for the right solution in the cloud. We as Balfour Beatty, we used to use Box.net. Eventually we switched to Ignite because it provided better security features. And but it's a third-party application. We used PDF software, PDF reader writers, and we also had additional field applications. The resulting of all this workflows is you're still producing silos of information where you have to migrate from one software application to another software application, upload it to a different software application through a different software application into a cloud, and that cloud distributes the information to PCs and to different software applications on tablets. And so rather than having silos of paper that we had on storage rooms, now we're having silos of digital documents that are not truly interconnected, and you have a redundancy of documents that's becoming a true issue. In this, as I mentioned before, one of the biggest challenges is being able to manage and control documents, the versions produced on every revision, who created the revised document, when that revised document was produced. And now you have the cloud services such as Ignite or Box, which actually are able to manage and control those different versions. Now, I think I talked a little bit about what the issues are right now with regards to digital documents, and let me walk you a little bit through what we had at Balfour as a document management process. The process was initiated by the design firms when they produce from Revit PDF drawings. And a lot of times, the PDF drawings that were produced were combined PDFs. Those combined PDFs were eventually exploded, and this was done by Balfour Beatty. We exploded the PDFs into single sheets, and from those single PDF sheets, all those PDFs were processed in order to hyperlink, to return some of the intelligence through doing batch hyperlinks. We used Bluebeam at that point, and Bluebeam had a great tool to do hyperlinks. We generated bookmarks and labels to be able to connect all those sheets together. After we went through that entire process, we created what we at that point called smart PDFs. And from those smart PDFs, we loaded those PDFs to our local plan room, which eventually synced up to the cloud. And the cloud needed to provide certain features. And eventually, that cloud also provided access to sync those documents to mobile devices. Now, if we look at the process to generate those smart PDFs, this here, it's the amount of work that you need to perform for each one of the revisions to create those hyperlinks. When a new set came out, usually it was a combined document of the new set with the sheets that were revised. You had to explode those sheets, you had to process those sheets, create your smart PDFs, and append those PDFs to the files that were up in the cloud. So you can see every time you add a process, that process is prone to errors, and it did happen at one point or another. It was efficient, if it was effective, but this was time consuming. So let me go through what I'd like to show you with Revit, with the R15 revised. Well, this is where right now I'm running the R17, but it has the same features and capabilities. When you print out a PDF from Revit, what you want to make sure is that you have the proper PDF printers. In this case, I have the Adobe PDF printer and the Bluebeam PDF printer set up here. Both are very capable of printing your documents with hyperlinks. So you don't have to go through the process of hyperlinking documents over again. Now, it's also important to understand that when you open the documents, there's also Qt PDF that you can also download the Qt PDF, and it will also produce hyperlinked documents. But it's also important to understand that not every PDF reader writer is capable of reading those hyperlinks. Adobe and Bluebeam, they do a very good job reading those hyperlinks. In the case of Adobe, if you generate a hyperlink to map the document back to your computer or to your local drive, Adobe does read the file semicolon and the address that you're mapping within your drive. Unfortunately, for some reason, I wasn't successful doing that mapping through Bluebeam. It did not recognize the file semicolon and the direction or the address where the file was located on your local drive. All right, so when you're doing the export and you export with this features, you get you need to set up your documents where you're going to select the sheets that you want to export. In this case, I created a Revit file with a few sheets. You also want to review your settings, the scale, the page that you're going to be printing out, and this is something that if you're setting a bin.
Ivan, are you still sharing?
Yes, it's not sharing anymore.
Well, you've been showing us the PowerPoint on your notes screen, so you've been showing us the opposite screen.
Let me see. I think I was showing. Let me check.
You weren't showing us the full screen PowerPoint.
Oh, I wasn't showing the full screen?
No. That's okay, though. That was no big deal.
No, it's fine.
But now we don't see anything because you're working on the other screen.
Not a problem. Let me switch screen. There you go. That better?
There we go. Yeah.
All right. So let me go back to what I was talking. Let's cancel this. So eventually, when you install your Adobe PDF or Bluebeam, you want to make sure that you install the PDF printers. That way, when you print out, it's going to print out with the hyperlinking on your sheets. All the callouts are hyperlinked. All the floors actually does a better job if you do the manual hyperlinking. I'll show you this in just a second. All right, you want to select the sheets that you're going to be printing. In this case, I created a file with a few sheets to print out. You want to do also the setup selecting the page size based on the scale that you have on your layout, and just avoid this. On page, you want to zoom it to 100% size based on the scale, so we'll print on the proper scale. And here's where I showed a while ago, if you were going to do a vector processing or a raster processing. In this case, when you have rendered image, a lot of rendered images on your sheets, a lot of people tend to use the raster. That way, the software is not trying to identify where you have where it needs to rasterize and where it needs to vectorize, and the process a little bit quicker. And what I usually do, or usually did, is I enable this link. It's usually always turned off. It's view links in blue. It helps out identifying where you have those hyperlinks on the sheets. It makes it easier for navigation. All right. So I'm not going to export it here. I already had it exported. That way I don't waste your time waiting for this to process. All right, so, well, before I move out from Revit, let me very quickly show you when you are organizing your drawings or your layout on a sheet, right? You want to make sure that where's my, here. That you use, that either you create or generate a grid that you're going to use as a reference to be able to locate your file. And if you provide the same grid to if the architect provides the same grid to their engineers, then everybody can use that grid to align specific grid lines. And the purpose of this is that when you're doing sheet comparison, you can actually do a sheet comparison or an overlay of sheets with your architects, your structural engineer, and your MEP guys. And this becomes extremely important, not only to be able to coordinate with those different stakeholders, but also to better be able to understand if you're looking at mechanical versus structural, and you're able to overlay both with different colors. You're going to see that in some cases you might find differences based on the level of completion of each one of those different releases. And you'll find that sometimes the MEP engineer has a version that's a lot more updated than the structural engineer based on changes from the architect. In let's say they shifted a column and you don't see that column shifted on the structural side. It does happen. And I've seen those cases where you have a more complete file from the mechanical engineer than from structural. So it's extremely helpful if you can coordinate with all of them to have the same base coordinate for drawings. So let me move into the PDF. All right, so this is exactly what I printed directly from Revit. I didn't do any changes, modifications, didn't go through a hyperlink process, but I did a direct printout. And if you look at it, all those hyperlinks are active. It was generated directly from Revit. And if I click on each one of those hyperlinks are mapped back to the pages where they're created. And another thing, that when you do the hyperlinking through Bluebeam or a PDF reader writer, or even through Adobe, I've in some cases used SmartUse that does the automated process of generating those hyperlinks. This does not create this hyperlinks over here, right? This was everything created directly through Revit, which makes it easier to navigate. Let's see. I'm sorry. Now, same thing with the index. Let me open up the index sheet. This is also a very short example that I wanted to show you. Through Revit, if you look at this, this was created as a property inside Revit. You can actually shorten out and automate the process of generating this hyperlinks. In this case, I just did a copy paste of the hyperlink directly from the cloud service that I was using. In this case, I was using OneDrive. But if this hyperlinks were created through Revit, and when exported to PDF, it retains those hyperlinks. And this is the same thing. Unfortunately, for some reason, this is something that I didn't find it to work on Bluebeam. It does not recognize this type of link. On the other hand, Adobe does recognize this as a link. So if I click on any of this, all right, let me move this. It appeared on the different screen, so let me grab this so I can show you. So it's going directly to the cloud service, and it's searching for that sheet, and it opens that sheet directly. So you can use, if you're using a specific cloud service, you can generate those hyperlinks, provided access to it with, if you want to set up a password, and that link can guide you directly to where that those hyperlinks are. All right, let me see if I have anything else to show you guys. Is there any questions or anything else that you guys would like me to cover? I know that part of the discussion was the creation or the export. In fact, let me switch back to Revit for a second. The export as a DWG file. All right. Don't save. Okay. When you export as a DWG file, you're able to set up the layers on how you want to export. And based on those layers, when you do a print through AutoCAD, then you can control layers. But as you see, it's Revit manages categories. And inside those categories, it manages different families. So you can convert those categories into layers by setting up your layers if you want to turn on and turn off layers. I don't know of any other way of doing this rather than exporting directly from a DWG. But at the same time, I never had the instance where I actually required or needed to use layers inside the PDF reader writer.
Yeah, it can be a very valuable tool for people, Ivan, to be able to use layers. And I don't really want layers per se. I mean, just like when you create a 3D PDF, you can use the navigator, for example, in Bluebeam, and you can turn off walls, you can turn off doors, you can turn off, any type of component that Revit pushes out. And I'm looking for some type of functionality directly out of Revit like that. It doesn't have to go to layers. I don't really want layers anyway. What I would like is if we could push a PDF out of Revit where that I can turn the walls off or whatever as a 2D element, is what I would like to do. That's the only value in what I'm saying about a kind of a smart 2D PDF.
All right, it's it's like having a DWG or a DWF file. Actually, it's like having a DWF file. On the DWF file, you can actually do those kind of.
Exactly.
All right. I haven't gone through that process, but I could look that up to see if there's any way of doing that directly through Revit. But same thing that I'm telling you right now. In this case, if it's something that's layered that you want to turn on and off, Revit doesn't manage layers. We would have to go through categories. Is there any questions or anything you guys would like me to go through?
Anything from anybody else? Anything else you wanted to show, Ivan?
No, I think I covered what I discussed with Nathan.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully, I didn't miss anything.
That sounds good. I appreciate it. Do we have anybody new on the call today? I don't think so. Doesn't look like it. All righty. Well, I am going to wrap.
There was a comment in the chat. How
Oh, I'm
about
sorry.
features in 2017?
Excuse me?
The question was, how about features in 2017?
Which features?
I don't know. The question was from Mark Decker.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Sorry, I just want to jump in. And I mean, is there that looked like it was a lot of 2015 workflow? Is there anything new that's changed between 15 to 17 that we should be looking for?
I haven't found any changes. I think the capabilities for the export of PDF with hyperlinks was actually released on 2015, the second release. So Revit 2015 R2 came with the activation of hyperlinks.
Yeah, we had been making a huge push for it in the PDF coalition. Matter of fact, I can't remember, Terry Ann, you may be able to remember when we started commenting about it. I can't remember how fast it went up the Augie list of wants from people. It was rather far down, and then when a lot of us on the PDF coalition started pushing for it and getting other people to vote for it and all, it moved up the list pretty quickly. So that was a great new feature. I remember when it came out and released too.
Yes, no, actually, it makes a lot of sense, because if you look at this process and everything you need to do to be able to generate a smart PDF that's actually usable for construction purposes, it's not only the amount of work that you have to perform to be able to get smart PDFs, but it's the time consumed by the person creating it and the time lost by the person expecting to receive those smart PDFs to be able to work with them. So at least being able to generate those automated hyperlinks directly when you export from Revit, it's big. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah. All righty. Well, anybody else have anything else?
Jim did stop by for a second, and he wanted to say that don't forget to go put your comments on the Bluebeam session that we have up and running for the guidelines. Next week, he will be pulling down all the comments. I'm actually in this video session right now, and we've got hundreds of comments. Thank you to everyone who's provided feedback. Don't forget.
Just before we wrap up, I know that's not common that the presenter does questions, but I do have a few, and this is for everybody that actually wants to answer. I have some feedback. I'm hearing myself quite a bit. All right, sorry. So the question is, have you guys used cloud solutions? And if you're using cloud solutions to be able to manage your documents, is there any in particular that you're using that you find best suit for this process?
On the owner side, we've used Box, we've used C&G, which is a document management system. We've also used Ignite and two other document management systems that have mobile and cloud capabilities.
Yeah, same. Box, Dropbox, ShareFile, and Bluebeam.
Okay. So let me ask another question then. So based on what you're telling me, you used a process similar to the one that's depicted right now on the screen by creating or hyperlinking, bookmarking, labeling, extracting information before posting all of those on this cloud service provider. Would that be right?
We do all of our workflow in Studio, so we have it all just in the cloud and we work in the cloud. But we do use the cloud-based storage for some of our workflows, yes.
Yes, but you go through the process of generating the hyperlinks, bookmarks, and labels and connect information together.
Correct.
All right. Just want to have a better understanding. because what I've seen so far is cloud providers such as Box, Ignite, they're great to be able to store documents, but I don't see them the best solution to be able to manage documents. And I've gone through this back and forth for several years, especially with Balfour, where we're trying to not only look at security, accessibility, and document control, but there are specific instances where you need a little bit more for construction purposes for the construction industry. Now, those cloud solutions are very generic in nature, where it actually works not only for construction, but for other industries. Would that be right with you guys, that assessment?
Yeah, I think some of those cloud solutions do not have everything it takes to do doc management.
Correct.
Yeah, because Bluebeam is phenomenal when you're. I love Bluebeam. It's great. I think it's one of the best PDF reader writers on the market. Adobe does an excellent job. But it's the same thing for document management. I think it's not set up for document management. It's excellent when you're writing, creating PDFs, when you're doing digital signatures. Outstanding. I think nothing compares to those two. But to be able to manage, track documents, track issues, I think it's probably not the best one. And when we're looking at doing this in the construction process, with Balfour, I remember. You have a cloud solution. You have that's a specific company, a specific contract with the company. You got your PDF solution that's licensing for a specific company. You have well, in this case, we have a different solution for iPads that was a different software application. So you're managing the process through multiple applications that eventually, as you guys know, too many hands on top of one thing, it's prone to error. You'll have issues at one point or another. You try to diminish those, but it does happen.
This is Terry Ann. Yeah, I would agree with all of that, and also agree that I think Bluebeam is good for PDF markup, but in terms of workflow of documents from A to B to C, it doesn't have that.
Yeah, well, I was managing. I used to be the senior process manager for Balfour BD, managing the Southeast region. And we looked at multiple options, multiple software applications to be able to not only automate the process and get rid of the hand work that need to be done to be able to convert those smart documents, but also try to host those documents inside the same application, manage the documents through the same application, and let that be the one source of truth. And we went through multiple of those applications. There's probably few that I think be interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, I have to log off. It was great to chat with all of you guys. Thank you for presenting, Ivan, and we'll see you all next week.
Sounds good. Ivan, that was really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, too.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.